Well, for the firefighters on the emergency service side, we were keeping an active eye on the weather. We knew that there was a possibility of 2 storms coming in, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The one in the morning actually sort of missed us and went further south. And so at that point we were sort of hoping maybe the other storm would miss us too. But as the day went on, closer to lunch, a little after lunch, we could tell that, the storm cell was growing, and that, what the meteorologists were talking about as far as the perfect storm was actually forming. So we had probably 10 to 15 firefighters standing by at our station. We normally do that if for severe weather or something. We'll have some guys standing by. As normal too, a lot of times when the severe weather sirens start going off, there's people in town that don't have basements and stuff, so we'll have anywhere from 10 to 15, sometimes more than that. People will come into the firehouse and just take cover in the basement and stuff with us as the storm's going on. So we were standing by, we could tell the weather. One of the state troopers actually come flying in our firehouse. We actually thought he was going to slide into our bay. And he said the tornado was right behind me. And when we looked up, the tornado literally was right behind him. So we were literally standing in our bay doors watching a tornado go by. And what we didn't understand is that there was actually 2 tornadoes, and that was the smaller tornado of the 2 that had went by. So as soon as the tornado passed that we could see in front of our face, then our guys all jumped in our trucks and we sent them out to designated sort of areas to sort of do an assessment of the town to see what went on or what. So as I proceeded north on 31 and got, going up 31, from the firehouse towards the 4-way, a lot of the area didn't look like it was damaged. And I'm like, well, this doesn't look too bad. Well, then we got up to the 4-way stop where the pizza place was, and you could tell that it was destroyed. And the fire department went to the pizza place like every Friday. That's where we met for lunch and just sort of hung out and talked during lunch hour. So we could tell that it was destroyed. As soon as we made a left-hand turn on 160 west, as we were going up the hill, I could start seeing houses that were gone. And I've lived in Henryville my whole life, so I actually knew names to every house. And I was thinking, were they in there? Are they there? So, house after house, and then you look back and see the school, was gone or devastated. And we got up to the Sprint station, and there was like 11 people trapped inside there. So at that point in time, we knew this was bigger than anything we have ever seen or could handle, in our lifetime. Our radio system failed. The primary radio system went down, our cell phones went down, the landlines went down. We have a backup radio system that was just actually was taken out of service, but it was what they dispatched us on. And since that was what they just dispatched us on, they didn't really have the volume up. So when I was calling for assistance, they couldn't hear us. They kept toning us out, just one run after another. But we were unable to answer them, and they were not comprehending that nobody from the fire department was answering them. I think they sort of got into, they were answering the runs, they were taking them, they were dispatching them, but then they wasn't realizing that nobody from our department was answering them to confirm that we were going on that run. Everybody in the county could hear us hollering for help, that we needed help. So eventually somebody was able to get a hold of them and said, hey, Monroe needs help. We requested every fire department in Clark County that was not hit, because at that point in time we didn't know where the tornado had went. So at that point in time, myself and a few officers made it back down to the firehouse, but between the Sprint and the firehouse is where the hailstorm happened. We had to stop everybody. All of our trucks were inside the bays during the tornado, so we had no damage to anything due to the tornado. When the hailstorm come through, it busted out windshields on a lot of our vehicles. Our guys were riding it out. There was one truck with 4 firefighters that was on the off-ramp attending to a woman that had a broken neck. that they didn't leave her. They used a piece of metal to cover herself and theirself up with that, and rode out the hailstorm with baseball-sized hail. So we made it back to the firehouse. The firehouse turned into the command post for the whole event of the tornado. As it turned out, the incident lasted for 16 days. The firehouse was the command center for 16 days. The first night, there was over 300 fire and EMS personnel working in Monroe Township doing searches and rescues. I believe this 911 center received over 800 911 calls, which is totally amazing considering that most people in Henryville, as soon as the hail started, I think the hail is what took out the cell phone tower and stuff, that there was that many 911 calls in Henryville, Marysville, Tisco area with a lot of the landlines and stuff being down. Like I say, I mean, it was truly a, we trained very hard, but this was bigger than anything, that we could ever imagine.
And was your own house damaged?
Yeah, every firefighter had damage to their house. Every firefighter had damage to their vehicles because they were at the firehouse. One firefighter, it's a husband that's on the fire department. He has a son and a daughter that's on the fire department. They all live in the same house. They lost their whole house, but they stayed at the firehouse and continued working. I mean, they knew that their wife was okay and that their mom was okay, and that they knew their house was gone. It was a day or two before they even went to their house to even look. I mean, they stayed there and helped serve the community, which I can't say enough for. Well, the first 2 days were sort of a blur because for 2 days we didn't even take a break. For the first 48 hours, we just run, and other departments were coming in, but other departments didn't know our area. So I mean, like I say, there's things that stick out in my mind to this day, like I say, driving up the road and seeing people's houses that people you've known, went to school with, that their houses were gone. To today, I mean, even though it's almost a year later, we're helping deal with trying to get people in their houses and stuff. And like I say, I've lived here my whole life, so most people I know. I mean, there's a lot of people that I didn't know that were affected by this, but the majority of the people I either knew their mom and dad, knew them or whatever. So I mean, from the very get-go, it was very emotional. But by being on the fire department for 30 years and being trained, I was in a different mode as far as, you have to be job specific, and the community and the safety of the whole community was the number one priority. I mean, I couldn't just stop at one house or have everybody focus on one house. There was so many different things. The tornado was like 13 miles long and a half a mile wide in Monroe Township, so that in alone, we're used to fighting one house fire or one or two car wreck, but to have a debris field 13 miles long and a half a mile wide, and every house had to be checked. If there was damage to a house, it had to be personally checked and tagged that somebody had checked to make sure somebody wasn't trapped inside the house or something. So that took probably 4 days to get that completely done with all the volunteer services that come in to help assist with that. The biggest thing, I think, that it's made it like a closer knit community, and the churches have always been a foundation for the community. Somebody would always laugh that there's almost a church on every corner, and for as much as the tornado took away in that 13 to 15 minutes, the churches have really stepped up and been what I was talking to Father Steve just a minute ago, is that in the Bible that the church is supposed to be take care of the people, not the government. And in this society today, where people maybe don't want to believe in faith or believe in God, they're wanting a handout from the government, and the government's broke, and people are wanting to know where this money is. And I think the thing with Henryville is that the faith-based groups come in and have done such a wonderful job, and the churches have stepped up and done such a wonderful job that people are being taken care of, but they're not being taken care of by the county, and they're not being taken care of by the state. They're being taken care of by all these faith-based groups that have come in and pledged to be here for the next 2 years to help get people back on their feet. So that to me has been the most positive thing, that the churches have come together and sort of helped take over a leadership role in this community and to help get the rebuilding done.
How has this whole crisis changed you?
It for our fire department, it's made us a closer knit group. You know, we deal with life and death things every day. The positive thing for me is that our state had set up this IMAT team, which is Emergency Management Action Team, and there's not very many states that have this type of team set up. And I was fortunate enough to go to Clearwater, Florida, to speak to over 500 fire chiefs from all over the nation to give my perspective on how this team actually come in, and they did more than just coming in and doing search and rescue and leave in a day or two. They actually helped clean up Henryville and the other communities with the debris removal. They helped make sure the utilities were back functioning and stuff. You know, so when they left in 16 days, we were so much further ahead than a lot of these groups. You know, you can watch the news and see up in New York and New Jersey and stuff how things are so much different up there because they're looking for the government to come help them and bail them out. And down here, we just had so many groups to come in, and the same groups are going up there to help, but they're not meeting the same welcomeness that they did down here. By me speaking to a lot of the people that were here and have went up there, it was just a totally different scenario and stuff that they said, from coming in here, being welcomed by people just wanting a hand up and stuff, and being willing to accept help, and their one neighbor helping the other neighbor out.
What would you want the average person to know who's never been through this sort of thing? How they should get ready, be prepared?
Well, there's only so much you can do to be prepared. I mean, you know, you can try to stockpile water and food and stuff, but if your house is totally destroyed, most likely that is gone. The biggest thing that I realized is, you know, this affected Henryville, Borden, Marysville, Otisco, but you could drive 7 miles to Sellersburg or 7 miles to Scottsburg, and everything was just like normal for them, you know. So to me, you could drive out of the devastation and go to a restaurant or something, you know. In the olden days, you know, where you couldn't maybe drive or different things, but there was so much food and water that was brought into the community, so much clothing and stuff. You know, the main thing was sheltering and stuff, getting people in out of the cold. You know, 3 days into the tornado, we had the biggest snowfall of the year. We had 6 inches of snow, so people had drug everything out of their house that they could salvage, and then it got 6 inches of snow on it. So I think the biggest thing our community just needs to work on is finding a lot of designated places for sheltering, so if one area is affected, we could move them somewhere else. You know, when this all started, they were wanting to be, the Red Cross was wanting to move people 10 miles to a shelter. Well, when you lost everything, when the windshield was busted out of it, nobody could drive anywhere. You know, people wasn't going to leave their valuables. Whatever they had was laying in their front yard. They wasn't going to leave. So we need to work on the sheltering as close to the areas we can. You know, like I say, the food and water, there was so much food and water brought in. I don't think anybody can say that they went, you know, a day with water and food. I mean, there was so much water brought in, it was unbelievable. So that part of it was the positive part too, is that you know, it wasn't like we were 2 or 3 days trying to get food and water. I mean, immediately there was tractor trailers bringing water, bringing food in. The utility companies, the electric company, within the first day or two of the tornado, they had electric back up to almost the center of town. I mean, the utility companies, the sewer and water company did an awesome job trying to keep the utilities up without electricity. You know, we got into where the town run out of water, then there was a boil water advisory, which was an issue because people then couldn't use the water to drink and stuff. They couldn't cook with it, you know, if they didn't boil it first. So, you know, there was a problem and a concern there that people were not going to know that and was just going to prepare food with the water, and then people would get sick from that. So, but none of that materialized. I mean, I think for a small community and the amount of devastation that we took, I think, you know, we can hold our head high and say that we did, you know, we lost one life, which was one too many. But I think if you would look back, and I think if you would show some of the pictures I showed down in Florida and in Indianapolis when I was at a conference there, for the amount of devastation that was there, the people could not believe that, like for our community, that there was only one death. I mean, you know, as much as the school was damaged, you know, 15, 20 minutes one way or the other, there could have been 1,400 kids in that school, and everybody knows that there would have been a lot of fatalities from that. So, you know, everything, you know, you can say it was fate. You know, I'm going to say God had his hand in this and you know, saved a lot of lives that day. You know, some people can say, you know, why did God allow that to happen? You know, I can't answer that question, but I know that God protected a lot of people that day. And sure was with a lot of the rescue workers and saving a lot of lives that day. I would just hope that they would look back and say that Henryville took probably the most devastating hit that they've ever took and hopefully never will again. But the people come together and they come together with their faith-based group churches, whether you're Presbyterian, Methodist. You know, I always sort of joke that it was, you know, sort of like the start of a bad joke. You would have a Methodist, a Presbyterian, and Catholic on a roof doing somebody's roofing job, and everybody was getting together. You know, the politics was all thrown out. You were just there for the common good of trying to help your fellow man, and that's what you're supposed to do. And I think our town was very resourceful in doing that, and by getting out quickly and asking for help and receiving help and not turning any help down. I think that put us on a good road to where we're at now a year later. But now, too, you know, we're a year into this, but there are still a lot of people that still need help. So I don't want people to think that, you know, a year later Henryville was 100% back to normal, and that's not true, because there's still a lot of people that need help that March to Recovery and a lot of these other faith-based groups are helping do. But there are still a lot of people out there suffering either physically or emotionally over this, and you know, it's going to take a long time to get over this.